Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here. I'm the pastor teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. Welcome to Pastor's Point of View number 356. This is being released on May the 30th, 2025. We have a prophecy update for you today. And if you take a look at our preview slide, here are the major 5 categories that we're going to try to cover in this session, Lord willing. The first thing we want to look at is the work of the Restrainer. We know from 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 6 and 7, that there is a restrainer at work in the world. Before the Antichrist or the man of lawlessness can come forward, the restrainer is holding back the man of lawlessness, in a lot of ways, the spirit of lawlessness in our world. But that ministry of restraint will end at the point of the rapture, and then the Antichrist will come forward. 2 Thessalonians 2, 6 and 7 says, "You know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed, for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way." Sometimes that restraint could be good policies coming from our own government. Notice Romans 13, verses 3 through 5, which says, "For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Then do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it, government, is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for government does not bear the sword for nothing. For government is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil." Sort of the belief that I have is that in comparison to the Biden regime, the Trump administration is doing a lot of wonderful things to hold back, to restrain the tidal wave of evil in our country. And to give you proof of this, let me draw your attention to this article from Breitbart, May 19th, 2025. It says, "Wrongly accused. Trump's education department rescinds Biden's $37 million fine on a Christian university." This is dealing with a Christian university that was harassed by the Biden administration, and now the Trump Department of Education has put an end to the harassment of this Christian school. Here's what the article says. It says, "The U.S. Department of Education has rescinded a massive fine against Grand Canyon University, the biggest Christian university in the nation, that was applied under former President Joe Biden's administration in 2023. The $37.7 million fine, the largest ever proposed against a university, was revoked Friday," the Daily Caller reported on Monday. The outlet said that the initial fine sparked allegations that the Biden administration was targeting and harshly punishing Christian universities. The Education Department confirmed it is not established that Grand Canyon University violated any Title IV requirements, including the claim that the school substantially misrepresented the cost of its doctoral program that was alleged by Education Department officials under the Biden administration. In 2024, a study found that the Biden-Harris administration targeted faith-based colleges while ignoring Ivy League schools, Breitbart News reported. So they made this claim that, they're misrepresenting the cost and so forth of their doctoral program, this Christian school. And they didn't apply the same standard to leftist type educational institutions like Ivy League schools. And that's the kind of targeting against Christianity that was done under the Biden regime, and here the Trump administration comes along and says enough is enough and puts that to an end. So there are a lot of people that are trying to find Antichrist, Satan, and demons in the Trump administration. I'm not of that perspective at all. Although, as I'll be sharing a little later, there are some areas of concern in the Trump administration. But when you look at the big picture and you look at the policies the Trump administration is promoting, they are very pro-Christian. This is the work of the Restrainer, the restraint of evil that the Bible says will be on the earth until the eve of the rapture. One of the things that's happening, though, is the judicial system is trying to put handcuffs on the Trump administration in terms of its activity in restraining evil. We are literally living in the midst of a judicial coup that is taking place in our country. The judicial branch is completely and totally out of control, and it's putting handcuffs on the executive branch for fulfilling its constitutional duties and doing what the American people overwhelmingly voted in the Trump administration to accomplish. So these attacks that we're going to share in just a minute from the judicial branch of government are not attacks on the Trump administration only. They're attacks on the American people that voted for the Trump administration. But notice this particular post from Trump's Truth Social account. He writes this: the Supreme Court has just ruled that the worst murderers, drug dealers, gang members, and even those who are mentally insane who came into our country illegally are not allowed to be forced out without going through a long, protracted, and expensive legal process, one that will take possibly many years for each person, and one that will allow these people to commit many crimes before they even see the inside of a courthouse. The result of this decision will let more criminals pour into our country, doing great harm to our cherished American Republic. It will also encourage criminals to illegally enter our country, wreaking havoc and bedlam wherever they go. The Supreme Court of the United States is not allowing me to do what I was elected to do. Sleepy Joe Biden allowed millions of criminal aliens to come into our country without any process, but in order to get them out of our country, we have to go through a long an extended process. In any event, thank you, Justice Alito and Justice Thomas, for attempting to protect our country. This is a bad and dangerous day for America. What is he talking about? Talking about Trump's ability to use I think it's called the Enemy and Aliens Act, to get illegals out of our country. It was a 7-2 decision against the Trump administration because allegedly they weren't allowing due process to those that they were seeking to deport. It's sort of interesting that these people came into our country without any respect for due process. And now all of a sudden we've got to jump through all of these hoops and give everybody due process to get illegal and criminal aliens out of our country. So this is the kind of thing that our judiciary is doing as our president is seeking to restrain evil in our land and to exercise common sense. Very, very recently, a part of our judicial system said that the Trump administration is not allowed to exert or exercise tariffs in some respects on other countries who have been ripping us off for years. I'm sorry, but tariffs and the imposing of tariffs, when you read the Constitution, it's within the executive branch's powers, and here's some court saying you can't do it. So it's very interesting what's happening as God has raised up somebody to restrain evil in our country. I would argue that the devil himself, or Satan, is working through our life-tenured, unelected judiciary as they are seeking to impose their leftist, left-wing, progressive agenda on our president. And they're doing so as individuals who are not committed to the Constitution, but are committed to a progressive ideology. In fact, some members of the judiciary that think correctly on this matter are pointing this out. Notice this particular article from legitgov.org, May the 21st, 2025. It's entitled, "The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Criticizes the Supreme Court of the United States for Blocking Trump Deportations under the Alien Enemies Act" that we referred to earlier. The article says a Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals judge is criticizing the Supreme Court for blocking President Trump's deportation of 2 allegedly illegal Venezuelan migrants under the Alien Enemies Act. Judge James Ho, a Trump appointee, wrote a concurring opinion Tuesday in which he argued that the High Court reversed the appeals court's unanimous decision that ruled that illegal immigrants identified as members of Tren de Aragua, a designated foreign terrorist organization, should not be allowed to proceed in this appeal because of the court's lack of jurisdiction. Quoting the Judge Ho directly, quote, "As an inferior court, we're duty-bound to follow the Supreme Court rulings whether we agree with them or not. We don't have to like it, but we have to do it," close quote, Ho wrote. So as our judiciary is getting more and more out of control in this regard, it's interesting that some members of the judiciary itself are recognizing how out of control the judiciary has become and are talking about it in some of their recent decisions and recent cases. That's why I think this Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals judge is criticism of what our Supreme Court and our judicial branch is doing is very, very interesting. So one of the things to understand about a prophecy update is to look at everything the Bible has to say about prophecy. And one of the things it clearly says about prophecy is the exercising of restraint of evil pre-rapture, before the Antichrist even comes to power. And so, in my humble opinion, that's what we're seeing transpire with the Trump administration. A lot of good things are happening through them. Elections have consequences. Evil is being restrained, but obviously the dark side doesn't like it. And so the judicial branch is moving away from what it exists to do and is putting illegitimate handcuffs on the President of the United States. With that being said, let's go to our second bullet point here, where we're talking about the temple. We know that in the last days there's going to be a temple built in Jerusalem. We know that from Daniel 9 and verse 27. It's a tremendous scripture which shows you everything that's going to happen in microcosm form in the events of the coming 7-year tribulation period. That very important prophecy says, "And he," that's Antichrist, "will make a firm covenant with the many," that's Israel, "for 1 week," that's a 7-year period. "But in the middle of the week," that's 3.5 years into it, "he," that's Antichrist, "will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate." We have that very important prophecy organized in the form of a graphic that we frequently allude to. It gives you an overview of the tribulation period, how long it's going to last post-rapture, 7 years. What starts it? A treaty of some kind between the Antichrist and unbelieving Israel. What's going to happen at the end of it? The personal return of Jesus Christ to the earth. And what's going to happen right at the midpoint? The Antichrist will betray the Jewish people by desecrating their temple and replicating what Antiochus Epiphanes did to them in the intertestamental period. Now, obviously, a prophecy like that can't be fulfilled without a functioning temple with sacrifices. So as the nation of Israel moves in the direction of wanting temple number 3 rebuilt, it shows you how close we're moving towards the 7-year tribulation period. Notice this list here that we also refer to frequently, entitled Israel's 4 temples. We're talking about temple number 3. Ever since the second temple was destroyed by the Romans, AD 70, for the last 2,000 years in the diaspora, as the nation of Israel has been outside of their land, they haven't had a temple. But as they've been regathered to their land, 1948, etc., there is an increasing hunger amongst the Jewish people for temple number 3. And as we see that hunger to rebuild that temple expressed, we know that we're moving very, very close to the 7-year tribulation period. An analogy that many Bible teachers have used, that I've used many times, is as follows. When the discussion of the world moves to Israel, we're dealing with God's hour hand. When the discussion of the world gets more specific and it moves to the city of Jerusalem, now we're dealing with the minute hand. And when the discussion of the world moves to the Temple Mount, now we're dealing with God's second hand. And so anything in the news related to an ambition to rebuild temple number 3, I'm going to seek to bring to your attention in prophecy updates, like this article here. May the 26th, 2025. It's from IsraelHayom.com. And this is the title of the article, Rabbis Debate Settling for Prayer at the Western Wall versus Temple Mount Worship. So there's a very special holiday coming up for the nation of Israel, a very special time period. And the article indicates that, it used to be kind of taken for granted that the Jews would go to the Western Wall to celebrate this particular holiday. But this time around, they're not really interested, a lot of them, in going to the Western Wall. They want to go to the Temple Mount. And this is a brand new move on their part. This is a brand new discussion amongst the rabbis. And so it shows you the changing trajectory in their thinking regarding their ambition to one day, I think very soon, have temple number 3. The article says this: a religious controversy is dividing Israel's Orthodox establishment as Jerusalem Day approaches, with influential rabbis publicly questioning whether the Jews should continue the traditional practice of praying at the Western Wall or embrace the more contentious path of ascending to the Temple Mount for worship. Monday's Jerusalem Day observances commemorating Jerusalem's liberation traditionally draw religious Zionist groups to the capital in celebration of the city's reunification and restored access to Jerusalem's holiest sites. These annual pilgrimages culminate in emotional prayer services at the Western Wall, where thousands gather for Thanksgiving ceremonies. Yet, a growing chorus of religious voices now advocates moving beyond the Western Wall entirely, urging Jews to pray directly on the Temple Mount itself. It's a fascinating article. I don't have the time to read all of it to you. I would encourage you to get it, download it, and read it, because it quotes the rabbis who are having the big controversial discussion about this. Let me just read to you one such quote where a rabbi is arguing that the Temple Mount prayer is preferable. It says, Rabbi Ariel, founder and director of the Temple Institute and head of the Temple Yeshiva in Jerusalem's Old City, advocates the opposite approach, meaning the Temple Mount approach, entirely. Quote, while the Western Wall functions like an enormous synagogue with special sanctity for prayer within the ancient walls, Temple Mount prayer remains superior. This principle applies throughout the year and holds particular significance on Jerusalem Day. Temple Mount prayer carries a different meaning and receives greater heavenly acceptance, he said. The concept appears in King Solomon's. Now remember, Solomon was the one who built Temple number 1. This concept appears in King Solomon's dedication prayer for the temple, where he invokes the word prayer in various forms 24 times. This emphasis demonstrates the paramount importance of prayer on the Temple Mount, the actual temple site. And the discussion amongst the rabbis continues, but notice this brand new voice, this brand new perspective as to exactly where they want to pray on Jerusalem Day. A lot of them say, forget the Western Wall, we're going to the Temple Mount, and that shows you this hunger that's growing within the nation of Israel to eventually rebuild Temple number 3. And things like this show us how fast we're moving towards the looming 7-year tribulation period. Let's go ahead and go to our third bullet point, and that has to do with the famous or infamous Gog-Magog invasion described in Ezekiel 38 and 39. If we can put that lower third up of Gog-Magog. And one of the things that I'm going to draw your attention to is the tension between Iran and Israel that we see frequently in our news cycles. I'm going to try to make the case here that tension exists because God said it would exist in the last days. And you may have some question marks as to why Persia in Ezekiel 38 and 39, a prophecy that we refer to frequently, a coming invasion of the nations spearheaded by Russia, Iran, and Turkey into the land of Israel. You might wonder why we think Persia is Iran. To help you with that, and since I don't have time to go into all of that here, I recommend my book, The Middle East Meltdown, where you can get the documentation as to why we think Persia equals Iran, why we think the various players mentioned in Ezekiel 38 and 39 represent modern day nations. And it's good that we have our map up there, because you'll notice you've got 2 countries circled there, Persia or Iran and Israel. And Ezekiel 38 and 39, Ezekiel had this vision given to him by God 2,600 years ago. And he said, in essence, as he talked about Persia being one of the leaders that will invade Israel in the last days, essentially what he indicated is the way you can tell we're approaching this end time scenario, and this is all part of the end time scenario, is there has to be tension, pressure between Iran and Israel. And probably when Ezekiel had that vision 2,600 years ago, it seemed absolutely crazy, because Persia at that time was an ally of Israel. It was the Persians that would conquer the Babylonians and allow Israel to return from the Babylonian captivity. And that tension seemed crazy, as late as 1979. Just prior to the Shah being deposed and replaced by the Ayatollah, and Persia or Iran becoming the Islamic Republic of Iran, because prior to that deposing, Persia was an ally of the nation of Israel. Persia was an ally of the West, but everything changed when the Shah was deposed 1979 and replaced by the Ayatollah. And ever since that point in time, the tension between those countries, Iran and Israel, has increased. And that's just something else you can look to to show us how fast that we are moving towards this end time scenario. Ezekiel 38 and 39, its fulfillment being part of that scenario. So just a couple of recent articles showing us this tension. This one comes from RT.com, May the 21st, 2025. The title of it is Israel Could Strike Iranian Nuclear Facilities. It says this: Iran currently enriches uranium to 60% purity, far above the 3.67% cap set under the now defunct nuclear deal, and close to the 90% needed for weapons-grade material. The chance of an Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities has gone up significantly in recent months, CNN reported on Tuesday, citing multiple U.S. officials familiar with the new intelligence assessments. While Israeli leadership has not made a final decision, recently intercepted communications suggest that planning is actively underway. Unnamed sources have told the network. U.S. intelligence also has noted Israeli military activities, including the movement of munitions and the completion of air exercises, which could indicate preparations for an imminent strike. Iran and Israel exchanged strikes in April and October of last year, marking the most dramatic escalation between the regional rivals. Earlier this year, Israel reportedly proposed an extensive bombing campaign to knock out Iranian nuclear facilities, according to the New York Times. Boy, the prophet Ezekiel said in the last days something incredible would happen. There would be growing tension between Israel and Iran, a prophecy that seemed absurd at the time it was given and absurd prior to 1979, and now the whole scenario is completely and totally credible. As Iran is on the precipice of getting its hands on weapons of mass destruction, atomic, nuclear, etc., Israel, rightfully so, doesn't trust Iran with those nuclear capabilities, and so they're plotting a way to take those capabilities down or take those capabilities out. And if you doubt that that is happening, President Trump recently said, I don't have a screenshot on this, but he's trying to discourage the nation of Israel from going that route, doing this sort of preemptive strike. And keep in mind, as the article points out, last year, 2024, in both April and October, Iran, which typically works through proxies like the Hezbollah and the Houthis, etc., decided to completely take the mask off twice and launch projectiles, missiles from Iran proper at Israel. And if it wasn't for Israel's Iron Dome, etc., that type of technology, Iran would have been successful in eradicating the nation of Israel from the face of the earth. And so when Iran did that, she took off her mask. We completely understand what her motives are. And there's tension every single day between Iran and Israel. And if you're a student of Bible prophecy, you say, well, of course there's tension between the two. There has to be tension on the eve of an invasion spearheaded by Iran into Israel. So this is just something else that we can look at to show you how fast we're moving towards the end time scenario. Let me give you one other article on this subject, if I could. This one from worldisraelnews.com. This is dated May 18th, 2025. It says, Khamenei of Iran accuses Trump of massacring Gazans and calls for the elimination of cancerous Israel. The article says Iran's supreme leader took aim at the United States over the weekend, even as nuclear talks continue between the Trump administration and Tehran, and explicitly called for the annihilation of the state of Israel. Here's how the article concludes. Iran's top cleric and spiritual leader also blamed Israel for corruption, war, discord in the Middle East, calling the Jewish state a cancerous tumor that will be destroyed. Without question, the source of corruption, war, and discord in this West Asia region is the Zionist regime, said Iran's leadership recently. So comparing Israel to a cancerous tumor that has to be removed, in the same way Israel is a cancer on the world stage, it has to be eliminated. So these are the kinds of pieces of rhetoric that are coming from the top of the top in Iran's leadership structure, the supreme leader. And it's just another example showing us that the tension between Israel and Persia that would exist in the last days, as predicted by the prophet Ezekiel 2,600 years ago, is coming to fruition. Let's add to the list here, and let's talk about our fourth bullet point, which is the world against Israel. We know that the world is going to turn against Israel in the last days. We know this from Zechariah 12 and verse 3. Written 2,500 years ago under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. It says, "It will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples, and all who lift it will be severely injured. And all," notice the repetition of all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it, meaning the city of Jerusalem. This prediction by Zechariah is backed up a chapter or so later in Zechariah 14, 2 and 3, which says this, "For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. The city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, half of the city exiled. But the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city." I mean, what are these prophets talking about? They're talking about a global hatred which leads to an invasion of the nation of Israel in the last days. And it's obvious as you look at the world scene today that this hatred in a global sense is coming into existence. Notice this map here, which has a description, the designation, I should say, the West Bank. Improperly named, by the way. But that's the whole name of the game in the world community. What the world community wants is for Israel to relinquish that territory to the so-called Palestinians, which would take Israel's width and reduce it to less than 10 miles. Here is another map of the so-called West Bank. This map is better because it labels that territory. Territory, by the way, that Israel won in a war of self-defense going back to 1967. But it labels that area Samaria and Judea, which is how the Bible labels that area. But once again, it's that lighter brown area. The world community wants Israel to relinquish that and turn it over to the so-called Palestinians. And is that going to bring peace? The world community in its drunken state thinks that it will. But how well did that work? If we can put that map up again, notice the Gaza Strip, the southwestern portion of the map. Can we put that map that we had up there? There we go. You'll see the Gaza Strip, southwestern portion of the map, dark brown area. That was an area that Israel relinquished to the inhabitants of Gaza in 2004. They had one and only election in that little tiny strip, and they elected Hamas in 2005. And ever since that point in time, that little area has been used as a beachhead to launch projectile after projectile, tunnel of terror after tunnel of terror, terrorist activity after terrorist activity into the land of Israel proper. Culminating, of course, in the events of October of 2023. So if the two-state solution, so-called, didn't work so well with Gaza, why in the world would it work with that lighter brown area entitled Samaria and Judea or the West Bank? Yet the world community is just dead set on this. We won't have peace in that area until Israel relinquishes that territory. And once, here's another map. The green area is Islamic countries surrounding Israel, where it's written into their charters that they want to drive Israel into the Mediterranean Sea. That little red dot, you may not even be able to see it. Your eyes have to be very good to see it. We put an arrow there showing you that represents Israel. So that's the state Israel is in. She's that little red dot in a sea of Islamic theocracies, dictatorships, where they have written into their charters, and they say it over and over again in their mosques, etc., that they want to drive Israel into the Mediterranean Sea. And you see how small Israel is. And the world community thinks if we just make Israel a little smaller, then peace is going to break out in the region. This is illogical. It doesn't make any sense. And yet this is the direction that the global community is pushing, where they're pushing things. And they're doing this because, as the Zechariah prophecies, particularly chapter 12, told us, that they're in a state of spiritual inebriation, where they're not really using their rational faculties. They're just blinded by anti-Semitic hatred. And when they do this, it will trigger God. The moment they divide Israel's land in this way, God gets triggered. You know, today we talk about people being triggered. What triggers God? What is going to bring God's wrath to planet Earth one day? Is it going to be abortion, homosexuality, evolution being taught in the school system? Those are bad things, and those are things worth talking about, but those aren't trigger points for God. What will trigger God and bring his wrath to planet Earth will be this success, effectiveness of the godless nations of the earth dividing his land in this way. We see this predicted in one of our earliest writing prophets, the prophet Joel. Notice Joel chapter 3, verse 2. God says, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Then I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my inheritance Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they have divided my land. Notice it's God's land that he bequeathed to the nation of Israel. Genesis 15, etc. And when the nations of the earth divide that land, God's wrath is kindled, it's triggered, and this is what will bring God's wrath to planet Earth in the 7-year tribulation period. And I'm here to tell you, folks, that that's exactly what the world community is plotting to do, even as I speak. Notice this article here from the United Nations website, dated May the 23rd, 2025. It says, diplomats prepare ground for June conference on two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. So we're getting ready now for another globalist conference. And what is going to be at the top of the agenda for this globalist conference? It's this two-state solution, taking Judea and Samaria or the West Bank away from the Jewish nation. The article says the preparatory session brought together UN member states to align expectations and finalize arrangements for 8 thematic roundtables that will help shape the conference's outcome. General Assembly President Yang urged countries to seize the crucial opportunity to finally make progress. This conflict cannot be resolved through permanent war nor through endless occupation or annexation. It will only end when the Israelis and the Palestinians can live side by side in their own sovereign, independent states in peace, security, and dignity, he added. Hey, it didn't work so well with the Gaza Strip. Why do you think it's going to work well with this two-state solution? The article goes on and it says, co-chairs France and Saudi Arabia emphasized the need for the June conference to go beyond reaffirming principles and to achieve concrete results on the ground. Faced with the facts on the ground, the prospect of a Palestinian state must be maintained. As outlined in the General Assembly Resolution 79-81, the conference will produce an action-oriented outcome document entitled, quote, Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine and the Implementation of the Two-State Solution, close quote. According to a concept note from the co-chairs, the conference will also feature the 8 thematic roundtables, each focused on critical dimensions of the two-state solution. The working groups include security arrangements for both the Israelis and the Palestinians, the economic viability of a Palestinian state, and humanitarian action and reconstruction. Exactly what God says don't do, the nations of the earth are trying to do. And when they say implement, they say we're going to force this on Israel, whether Israel wants it or not. There are perpetual headlines talking about this June conference. Notice this one, a screenshot from Times of Israel. It says UN conference, if we can put that up, on the two-state solution to Israel-Palestinian conflict set for June. Diplomat in Paris says the confab, jointly sponsored by France and Saudi Arabia, should lead to a more national joining the 150 that already recognized Palestinian statehood. Here's another screenshot. It says this, key global alliance meeting today in Rabat, co-organized by Morocco and the Netherlands. The EU and its partners develop concrete action-oriented inputs to the UN high-level conference in June, urgent to deepen and accelerate the work of the alliance to advance the two-state solution. Here is another screenshot. Notice the Arabic writing at the top. It says numerous preparatory meetings are being held in preparation for the two-state solution conference, which the United Nations will host between June 17th and 20th under the joint Saudi-French chairmanship. Here is, I believe, just one more screenshot. This particular article says Saudi Arabia and France are to impose a Palestinian state without Israeli input. This agenda of dividing Israel's land, the mindset of the nations of the earth is we're going to do it whether Israel likes it or not. Obviously, Israel won't like it because it will reduce them to a place of military indefensibility. It says here, a joint UN-backed conference will establish binding timeline for a Palestinian state with sanctions for non-compliance. It looks like coercion to me, while disregarding Israel's security concerns and not requiring Palestinian recognition of Israel. I mean, let's say they get away with this and do this. What are the so-called Palestinians going to do in return? Are they going to at least acknowledge Israel's right to exist? Well, according to this excerpt, that's not even on the table. So it seems to be a one-sided globalist confab grab bag. Notice this particular screenshot. This is from Reuters. May the 26th, 2025, it says the Palestinian flag is to be raised at the World Health Organization for the first time. I mean, what is the World Health Organization? They're the ones that led us into, planet clampdown, planet lockdown that we all experienced in 2020. I'm very grateful to our president who has pulled the United States of America out of the World Health Organization. And as that money tree, so to speak, kind of disappears for the World Health Organization, they're just follow the money, now turning to these Islamic countries for financing. And so that's why for the very first time they're raising the Palestinian flag, meaning Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, in the mind of the World Health Organization, belongs to the Palestinians, so-called, and not Israel. So what am I trying to communicate here? I'm trying to communicate how the World Health Organization, the United Nations, all of these other sort of independent players are turning against Israel, exactly like the prophet Zechariah said they would do in the last days. And it's just another sign of the times that we're rapidly approaching the end of the age. Let's look at our fifth and final category in this session. It has to do with anti-Semitism. You can read all about anti-Semitism in Revelation 12, verses 6 through 17. We have a graphic on that. It's dealing with, and it's entitled Connecting Revelation 12 and Anti-Semitism. It's describing what happens to Satan once the beast desecrates the temple at the midpoint of the tribulation period. He plummets to the earth, knowing he has but a short time left, and he seeks to devour, to gobble up. The Bible says he'll have great wrath towards. The word there is orge. Towards who? Towards the woman clothed with the sun and the moon and the 12 stars. And that becomes the source, spiritual source behind anti-Semitism. Most people without the Bible can't figure out why anti-Semitism is on the uptick. I know why it's on the uptick. It's on the uptick because God said it would be on the uptick as we get closer to the end time scenario. What is anti-Semitism? It is irrational hatred for the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Are we seeing the acceleration of anti-Semitism in our world? Are we seeing it happening in our country? Well, of course we are. Notice this particular article from one of our friends, Olivier Melnick. I'll mention him in just a moment as one of the speakers at our Sugarland Bible Church Prophecy Conference, February 2026. He wrote this article. You can find it on his shalominmessiah.com. And the title of it is The Tentacles of October 7th Beast of Terror Are Extending to D.C. and Beyond. He writes, the world woke up to the news of yet another killing of Jews, this time in Washington, D.C. Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, both on staff at the Israeli embassy in D.C., were about to be engaged. They were also the epitome of peace-seeking and interfaith dialogue. They were attending an event at a Jewish museum when the shooter, Elias Rodriguez, killed them both and shouted, quote, "I did it for Gaza, free, free Palestine," close quote, as the police apprehended him. Melnick says it is a result of the continual, notice this expression here, normalization that we have been witnessing over the last couple of years. It is a result of the continual normalization of anti-Semitism. that we have been witnessing over the last couple of years. Normalization of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, even in our country, is becoming normal. It's becoming institutionalized. Melnick goes on and he says, case in point, Rodriguez is not a Muslim, and yet he was taken by the police. As he was taken by the police, he said, I did it for Gaza, free Palestine. Anti-Semitism has become an equal opportunity killer way beyond the radical Islamic circles. Elias Rodriguez appeared to have planned the killing, and he carefully waited to be apprehended to shout this statement. He showed no remorse. On the contrary, he appeared full of pride as he shouted his venomous cry in front of the cameras. He not only waited to be apprehended before yelling "Free Palestine," but he first shot people outside and then got inside the museum, appearing as a victim before he spoke up and was consequently detained. As he wore his red kippah, which is a Middle East head covering popularized by Yasser Arafat, he sent a 2025 message no different than those who wore a swastika during World War II. Yoron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram were about to get engaged in Jerusalem within days of this tragedy. They both were followers of Yeshua, Jesus. Isn't that interesting? These two diplomats, young diplomats that were shot, weren't just Jews, but they were Messianic Jews. Is that the reason they were targeted, perhaps? We're not sure. It says, now is not the time for theological discussion between Jews who believe in Jesus and Jews who don't. It's time for Jews to unite against anti-Semitism, because when it comes to the anti-Semites of the world, like Rodriguez, a Jew is a Jew regardless of his or her belief in Jesus. For that fight, all Jews must work together. So you probably heard about this horrific killing, murders. It's been all over the news. I think we had up a little earlier a picture of this young Jewish couple that was assassinated by this anti-Semite. Here is something from Donald Trump's Truth Social, May the 21st, 2025. In the wake of these killings, he says, these horrible DC killings based obviously on anti-Semitism must end now. Hatred and radicalism have no place in the USA. Condolences to the families of the victims. So sad that such things as this can happen. God bless you all, the president says. You know, one of the things that's even more, well, I don't know if I want to say more, but very much horrific in light of these killings is the fallout. The comments, that have been made are just grotesque, disgusting, totally out of bounds, and off the charts. Notice this article from the postmillennial.com, May the 24th, 2025. It says, new cryptocurrency celebrates the Free Palestine terrorist who assassinated Israeli embassy staffers. This article says a cryptocurrency meme coin giving tribute to the suspected Free Palestine terrorist Elias Rodriguez launched within a few hours of his arrest and being charged with the murder of a couple who worked as staffers at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. Rodriguez was seen on video being taken into custody by police on Wednesday, where he was yelling "Free Palestine" after he reportedly shot dead Sarah Milgram, 26, and her boyfriend, Yaron Lashinsky. She was 26, he was 28. The couple was set to be engaged next week. As a twisted tribute to him, traders launched a meme coin with his likeness and name, according to the New York Post. The outlet reported on Friday that the meme coin was hovering around 368,000 and then dropped to 24,000. As of Friday, around 550 people had bought the meme coin. Milgram, initially surviving the first round of his shots, attempted to crawl away, and as she did, Rodriguez was seen on video walking closer to the victim and shooting several times more to finish the killing. Rodriguez has been discovered to be a left-wing extremist and has been linked to a socialist political party. He has also praised the alleged United Healthcare CEO assassin Mangione, if I'm pronouncing that right, on social media, along with other comments such as death to America, as well as death to Israel. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Someone is shot in cold blood, and the reaction is to put together this meme, cryptocurrency, celebrating not the commemoration of the lives of the people that were killed, these two Messianic Jews, but to celebrate the killer himself through a meme and a coin that is popular for a season on cryptocurrency. I don't know what to say about that other than it's just sick. That is a moral rot and a moral sickness that I think is indescribable. To make matters worse, notice the reaction to this assassination by the Democratic Party. This article is put out by Laura Loomer, May the 24th, 2025 at loomered.com. The title of it is Democrats Remain Silent on Pro-Hamas Anti-Jewish Violence After Israeli staffers were murdered by a communist jihadi sympathizer in D.C. Loomer writes, Jewish leaders are demanding accountability and asking why some lawmakers still remain silent, and why many lawmakers continue to give oxygen to the violent and pro-Hamas Palestinian movement. Despite the violence and explicit support for Islamic terrorism that is being displayed at these protests, prominent Democrats, including Representatives Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, members of the squad, have refused to denounce these displays of terror. Instead, many on the left continue to ignore or deflect questions about their alignment with extremists and pro-terror rhetoric. This article goes on and it talks about the many examples of Democrats not responding properly to these types of killings. Here is how the article ends. It says, the repeated refusal of Reps Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib to condemn Hamas flags, and now silence after the murder of 2 Israeli diplomats, underscores a broader failure among Democrats. Their tolerance of anti-Semitic, anti-Trump violence is a dangerous betrayal of American values. The First Amendment protects protest, but not incitement, not hate, not silence in the face of terror. Elected Democrats and their anti-Trump allies should be ashamed of the dangerous rhetoric and behavior they continue to tolerate and promote. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. Notice this particular article from the Geller Report, Pamela Geller, May the 27th, 2025. It's describing, and there's actually a video where you can go on to her article and watch this. A racist screams, and I'm glad she bleeped out all of the profane words that were used, because we don't use profanity on this family-friendly program that we do entitled Pastor's Point of View. But as I read some of these names and words, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. New York City, racist screams the B word, suck my D word, at a Jewish family walking with their 8-year-old child to synagogue. And then the person doing this pulls down his underwear, the title says, spanks himself in front of the kids and yells the C word and the K word. Here's sort of a summation of Geller's article here. She says a Jewish family walking to a synagogue in New York City was harassed by a man who screamed racial slurs and exposed himself. The incident highlights the ongoing issue of hate speech and harassment faced by the Jewish community. You know, just as Jewish students are harassed at our Ivy League schools for simply going to class, now in New York City, here's this family taking their 8-year-old to synagogue, and this is how they're treated. Folks, this is the kind of thing that used to go on in Europe. In France, you can see this kind of thing in France, but not the United States of America. I mean, this is a change of character of our country. Notice what George Washington, the father of our country, said to the Jewish people when he was invited to worship with them at the Toro Synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island. He wrote a letter to them, a very famous letter, the same day, dated August the 18th, 1790. This is what Washington said. He says, I rejoice in the opportunity of assuring you that I shall always retain a grateful remembrance of the cordial welcome I experienced in my visit to Newport. The government of the United States gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. And then he addresses the Jewish people in America. He says, may the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants of the land, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid, close quote. I mean, what happened to this poor family in New York simply going to worship at a synagogue is the exact opposite of what George Washington in this famous letter promised to the Jewish inhabitants of the United States of America. He said, none will make you afraid. These people were made afraid. The United States doesn't promote bigotry or persecution. Well, these people here in New York City, according to this Pamela Geller article, not only are they being put in fear, but they're being made afraid, they're being persecuted, they're being mistreated constantly. You know, people that want to do this, my recommendation to you is to move to France or Europe, but what you're doing has no bearing on the foundation and the core character of the United States. It's disgusting. It should be condemned by everybody, including Omar, Tlaib, AOC, etc., etc. But these things are happening because God's word says that anti-Semitism would increase as we get closer to the end of the age. Let's take you, if I could, to our review slide. Here are the categories that we covered in this pastor's point of view. In this prophecy update, covered the Restrainer, the temple, Gog-Magog update, the world against Israel, and anti-Semitism. 2 quick infomercials as we conclude. I want to make you aware of our prophecy conference coming up February 20th and 21st. We invite you to come to Sugar Land to participate in that prophecy conference. The theme of it is Last Days Discernment. So as to accommodate a larger group of people, we have rented the Marriott, Sugar Land Marriott in Town Square. There is a website we want you to go to register. You see it there, profcon.com. There's a QR code to access it. If you would like. Here are the conference speakers: Olivier Melnick, that I referred to a little earlier, bringing us up to speed on anti-Semitism. Russ Miller, dealing with the creationist issue. Alex Newman, one of the leading voices exposing the New World Order. Dr. Paul Wilkinson, one of the great critics of what is called Christian Palestinianism and replacement theology, a tremendous speaker. Patrick Wood, one of the best in dealing with or exposing the growing mark of the beast system. I'll be one of the speakers. This conference is going to run all day Friday, all day Saturday. We're going to have a banquet, I believe, Friday evening at this place, Marriott Sugarland. We're going to be having our speakers stick around, leaving the Marriott Sunday morning, the 22nd, coming to Sugarland Bible Church for our normal church services. It's just going to be a great weekend, a great time of fortification, a great time to receive some of those essential nutrients that you need in your walk with Christ. And so we want to make people aware of it, and go ahead and start registering. Registration is now live. Let me put another bug in your ear about something that is coming up September 24th through October 10th, 2026. So the conference I just talked about is February 20th to 21st, 2026. And this is also 2026. And where did my dates go? There they are. September 24th to October 10th, 2026. It's a trip that we are offering through Compass Ministries, organized and spearheaded by the great Bill Perkins. It runs 17 days. It's a cruise Bible Lands tour covering the major areas that Paul covered on his missionary journeys. Ephesus, you see there, Philippi, Thessalonica, Athens, Corinth. And then we travel to Jerusalem for a few days. You'll see Galilee, the city of Jerusalem. And as we're traveling, you'll enjoy Bible studies by myself and also Bill Perkins on the ship. And we've got a 5-star ship, 9-day cruise, 3 countries, 5 days in Israel. And to find out about it, you need to go to compass.org. Compass.org. And there's a web link. You might be able to see it at the very bottom of the screen. But if you go to compass.org, you can find all about it. So my wife and I are hosting it along with Bill and Susie Perkins. And boy, I tell you, you go on some of these trips and you actually travel to the places where the biblical stories unfolded. And it just adds a new dimension to your biblical understanding and your faith. And so it's going to be a great time. So I want to make you aware of that. One other fast infomercial, since today is the last day to register. I'm the president of Chafer Theological Seminary. We have rolled out our summer term courses. Today's the last day to register, but the summer term goes from June 2nd to July 25th. You'll see 4 great courses that you can take. Evangelism and World Missions by Charlie Bing. God and Government by the great constitutional scholar Dr. John Eidsmoe. Intertestamental History and the Gospels taught by Dr. Michael Halsey. And then our Spiritual Life course taught by Dr. Bradley Maston. And so take a look at those course offerings. Take a course if seminary training is for you. Take a course, go deeper into your Christian understanding by accessing some of the great resources that we have at Chafer Theological Seminary. With all of that being said, we're out of time, so I will see you next time, Lord willing, on Pastor's Point of View. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. God bless you.